Dr. Mary Ann Van Derzen. I am the Vice President of Academics at Warren County Community College. And with us today we have Rob Kim, who has been the Director of Testing of the Testing Center at Middlesex County College since 2006. He has a BA in Psychology from Haverford College, an EDM in Educational Statistics and Measurement from Rutgers, and an MA in Clinical Psychology from Fordham University. Before coming to Middlesex, he worked at the Educational Testing Service in Princeton, New Jersey for about 17 years in both the Research and Program Administration divisions. At Middlesex, he is in charge of the Testing Center and has had several positions on various committees, including the Placement Committee, Academic Standards Task Force, Assessment Committee, and Development Education Committee. He is the co-chairperson for the New Jersey Test Administrators Special Interest Group and has represented New Jersey community colleges on the College Board Community College Assessment Working Group. So welcome to Rob. Lynn Nelson. She began working at Mercer County Community College in should I tell them how long ago? 1989 as a part-time test proctor. She found that she loved the job and the college. She is happy to deal with new students and faculty every day and is still learning something new every single day and is never bored. She worked her way up from proctor to test administrator and then to full-time testing specialist and finally in her current position of manager, external testing and operations. Along the way, she earned her associates in special education from Mercer and her bachelor's of liberal studies from Thomas Edison University. So please welcome Lynn. Lori Trachtenberg. After 25 years at Prudential, where she rose to the rank of Vice President of Accounting and Finance for their corporate law department, she decided it was time to do something more meaningful where she could touch the lives of real people rather than working for a corporate bottom line. She enrolled at Georgian Court University where she earned a bachelor's in certifications in elementary education, special education, and Spanish. As a work-study student, she worked in the Academic Developmental Center where she tutored various subjects and proctored placement tests. She stayed on as a part-time employee in that position after graduating and was looking for a full-time teaching position. And as luck would have it, Ocean County College was looking for a director of testing and adaptive services, and the job qualifications were married to her prior business experience and her recent education and experience with testing. She was fortunate to have that position and has been there since 2008 and loves it. Without further ado, I'll turn this over to Rob. And we'll pose questions at the conclusion of the presentation, but at any time during the session, if you wish to ask a question or you would like further clarification, please do raise your hand and we'll call on you, or we'll come to you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Middlesex. I hope we'll be able to enlighten you and inform everyone about the agreement made by the NJCC about setting some common guidelines for test scores within the state, and to encourage everyone to look into and use multiple measures to place students. After a lot of discussion and a lot of work, the Council, Community Colleges, the Vice Presidents in Academic Affairs and the Presidents signed off on a document that was put out last year. Many of you might have already seen it. This is part of the document. I've also placed copies of the table that comes with the document on each of the tables here in the room. Again, we want to talk about coordinated autonomy. We are all together, and we try to work for many of the same things, but we are also independent institutions. But we try to work together, to try to work towards our common goals, and to make things better for our students transferring among us and transferring to four-year schools. So the presidents and the vice presidents agreed on this wording. Again, each college is responsible for themselves for defining college readiness. All right? We have some, we have some common goals, and we do have the New Jersey core standards that we have to adhere to or follow, but each school gets to define it themselves. We want to emphasize that. And you can use a multiple measures approach where you use various different tests or high school grades, rank, individual course grades, and other measures that some schools I know are working on to look at what can best place our students in their appropriate courses. Okay? However, just like we did back in 2006, I think when we originally met to talk about Common Cut scores, we do recognize that there is value for the colleges to embrace some reasonable common ground in defining college readiness. We encourage everyone, the council encourages everyone to continue doing research in this area, to look at how well the placement test scores are working, as long as any other measures that you might be considering, to see what's the best way to place the students at your institution. Hopefully some schools will follow up and present in future conferences what has worked, and just as important, what hasn't worked in placing their students correctly into courses, credit level and developmental courses at each of your institutions. With those guiding principles in mind, high school GPA and high school curriculum, that is college prep, should be included as one of the multiple measures approach to determine college readiness. Cannot stress that, I usually say to people taking the placement test at Middlesex that 4 years worth of data is usually better than 4 hours worth of data. And that's true, but we still need a common yardstick, and we all do know that every high school that feeds students to us are not necessarily the same, or they're following their own guidelines, even though I know that they're supposed to be following the Common Core, the Jersey Core guidelines for academics, especially in math and English. We all know that each people does things in their own way. My own daughter started high school this year, and I was looking over their course catalog, and I found courses called Structured Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, and I wasn't too sure what that meant. When I read more into it and looked more into it, I found out that was ESL Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. But they didn't label it clearly that way. And I know when I worked at ETS in program management, there was a joke running around that a high school had on their transcript AP ceramics. I don't know if you folks know, but there is no AP ceramics test, and AP is a copyrighted term by the College Board, so the College Board did go after that one school. For better or worse, sometimes, not everyone of course, but sometimes high schools make it difficult for us to understand their transcripts, and to follow them. When placement scores are used, a college should first look for the college readiness benchmark scores recommended by the testing organizations themselves, all right? Whenever those benchmarks are available. Many of the numbers that I have on the sheets that I've handed out are based on those benchmarks, okay? Through their own research, these are the cutoffs that the testing organizations themselves have listed as college and career ready, and I believe it's a good place to start off. I'm not saying that we should, after further research, we should adhere to them religiously, but it is a good place to start off, especially with all of us looking at the new next generation tests and Accuplacer. I know a lot of us discussed when we were going to switch over. The College Board switched the deadline to January of 2019 now. A lot of us were planning on moving over to the new test this spring. I think Middlesex actually might be the only one who actually did it. But we don't have as much experience with them, and even if we did some pilot studies with it, things usually behave a little differently when you give it to your entire population coming in. So we have set the standards based on those guidelines. We've tweaked one or two of them a little. which is encouraged as well. You know, if your own academic departments are uncomfortable with some of the levels, but it's the best place to start with a new assessment. And I know this hasn't been discussed in a while, but when decision zones are used, we should also look at the standard benchmarks and ranges recommended by the testing companies. We should look at the ranges, ability ranges, and standard error measurements, right, to help guide us when using their assessment. You know, apply these principles to the tests that we discussed. This document is new that we talked about again. We talked about setting the guidelines for the next generation test, just like we set the scores for the original Accuplacer scores back in 2006. We have talked about the SAT before and updating it for the new SAT. A few years ago, we discussed PARC, but for the first time, we're also having guidelines based on the ACT test. In discussing within our own testing organization, we found that different regions of the state see more or less ACT scores, but the number of students taking the ACT in the state has risen. So we wanted to give the students as many different ways to prove that they're college ready. And if they're found to be college ready based on any of these test scores, or through multiple measures, or by whatever means, or high school GPA or course grades, you know, we feel that the students should be placed into college level courses, and if not, placed into a program where those students can be brought up to speed as quickly as possible to be college ready. Are there any questions about the guiding principles of the document? These are the cutoffs that we came up with. It might not be totally clear on the screen, I apologize. But that's why I handed out some of the documents. Right? One side shows set cutoff scores, the other side shows ranges that the schools can use. The PARC test, first of all, I know that the governor has promised to get rid of the PARC test here in New Jersey, but it is still being given this spring. My daughters are getting ready for it right now, and there is talk about the governor starting a committee to look into new assessments, but they may not be able to finish that quickly enough to change the assessment for next year. So a lot of us are assuming that PARC will probably have to be used next year as well, as long as we can get the one-year contract. Again, following the guidelines based on the consortium itself, we recommend that a 4 in the English language arts and literacy, grade 11 exam, which is the highest PARC exam for English, be used, and the exams for Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. We do realize that the Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 tests may be taken early. Students are now being given, if they're at that level, the PARC level 1, Algebra 1 test, even in middle school. However, we feel strongly that if they place high enough in the exams, it still should be considered a benchmark that they made at least that level. For the new SAT, we discussed using the college benchmarks. The College Board's recommendations are there. And we also extended it to a cutoff for Algebra 2. But please note that these are the scores recommended by the College Board, but they are not the scores that were voted on and approved by the council and for New Jersey for identifying STAR students. So different colleges have used these numbers in different ways. Some have stuck to these numbers and explained their use for STAR students with multiple measures that they're placing in the top 15% of their class as well. Other schools like Middlesex has used the scores recommended for STAR students to let everyone in. That's one way different schools have used these guidelines in different ways. And for the first time for ACT, we give the cutoffs for the English, the reading, and the math sections of the test. We did that to match the USAT's quote-unquote verbal section, evidence-based reading and design test, so that we have a score for both reading and English, and we recommend that you use the scores in combination to pass people out of, to be college ready for English. Below you will see the guidelines that we have for the next generation Accuplacer tests. Again, the Right Placer test has not been upgraded yet. It was in discussion with the College Board. I don't know what the current status of that is. So the Right Placer score guideline that we've used before, or talked before, of a 6 on a 0 to 8 point scale is still recommended. But we now give guidelines for the writing test, which for you who are familiar with the old test, is basically an upgraded sentence skills test. The reading test, which is upgraded the reading comprehension test, and the QAS test for math, which is quantitative reasoning, algebra, and statistics. You'll note statistics is added to that, again, based on the Common Core standards. The other side of the sheet will give you ranges they play, help guide schools if they want to use these ranges for a decision zone, giving students the benefit of the doubt. And they're based on different benchmarks. There's some footnotes there, whether they're based on the standard error measurements where we could find them, or based on the ability ranges defined by the various testing companies. You will notice for Park, that is the range, that is more the raw score. That's the score that they initially get on the Park, and then it's translated into the 1 to 5 scale. You will notice that but the numbers aren't universal for each test, they're slightly different. And I've seen on high school transcripts, high schools report Park scores in different ways. I know I talked with Dr. Nesbitt once, we wish there was a standard way for high schools to report everything to us, but everyone reports it their own way. I have seen high schools report this score instead of the 1 to 5 scale. I've seen other ones just do the 1 to 5 scale, so you would have to try to find out from the students where they placed, see if you can put them into a decision zone situation, or they just blanketly don't put it on their high school transcripts at all. The new SAT, we gave you the numbers as well, and ACT ability levels, and for Accuplacer, we gave you based on the new ability levels here. Again, especially when it comes to the next generation tests, these are based on guidelines from the testing companies and their initial tests and studies with their new exam. However, when it goes out to the public and more people take the test, we might have to make some adjustments or recommendations for adjustments on those ranges based on those numbers. And again, there's some more detailed information about the different ranges and scores. As you can see for the Park, the numbers don't exactly match up, especially on the higher end. But these will give you the different ranges for those different levels. Oh, and we have a sign-up sheet that we're going to put up here after the talk. If you would like to have a copy of these slides or any of the background documentation we use to get the information for this presentation, please give us your name and email address, and I'll gladly email you all the documentation and PowerPoint slides. Again, the new SAT, standard error measurement was published, so we use that. Please note that new SAT has various scores, and some schools have talked about using the different component scores. We stuck with the main section scores. Standard error measurement for that is plus or minus 30 points. ACT, not readily find standard error measurement reported, so we talked about the different ability levels and bands that they use, and the college readiness benchmark labeled there as well for the different tests. Again, a lot of times you will notice that to give the students the benefit of the doubt, the cutoff used within any of those ability ranges is not the middle value, but the lowest value, right? To allow as many students as possible to take, or to try to take college level work. Of course, individual colleges might want to raise the number based back to the standard college readiness benchmark and use the range as a decision zone. And then we talked about the new Accuplacer test. The one thing we didn't talk about here, just like we did back in 2006, we talked about placing out of Algebra 1 initially for placement into the lowest possible college level course, credit level course in mathematics. Now, with the core standards being adopted, and I believe this fall's class or next fall's class will be the first class, I think it's this fall, that'll have 4 years of Common Core instruction within the high school. Schools might want to start looking at the idea, even though it's not required for high school graduation, to set the mark or move up their courses to Algebra 2. Algebra 2 is now considered a high school course that they are supposed to take and supposed to pass the part, even though the initial cutoffs that the state is still using is only for Algebra 1. And students may find more success in transferring courses that require Algebra 2 as a prereq, not just Algebra 1. Again, different schools feeding to different four-year institutions in different parts of the states or with different agreements might have a way of transferring other credits. My background is not math education, but more with tests. My only guideline I could use is, for instance, the AP statistics test. The guidelines that the College Board publishes to the high schools for students that are qualified to take that test is that they've had 2 years in algebra instruction before taking that class. Also, you will notice, and again, with Common Core, they don't have, this is more of a personal opinion, they don't have a STEM track Algebra 2 or intermediate algebra and a non-STEM track Algebra 2. Every student is required to pass the same and understand the same material. Multiple factors or multiple measures. A lot of this discussion that we have here is based on a College Board white paper, again, that I can send you if you're interested. But just quickly, we want to talk about the difference between a factor and a measure. Factors are the overall area, whether academic or non-academic, that we use to place students into the correct level courses. The measures are the actual instruments, the scores that measure those factors. So for academic, you could use standardized test scores, you can use high school GPA. Non-academic factors, you can look into the idea of grit, determination, or other things. I know a lot of people look into a lot of factors when it comes to matters of how much they work off campus, how far they live how far they live from the college. I've seen one question proposed that they asked, do the students have a private, quiet place to study at home? And again, mathematically, correlationally, regression-wise, we can show that things we can prove that things are related to doing well in courses. But I would caution using some of those questions unless you are prepared to factor it up. Many of those questions can be considered standard SES questions. Just like we can't necessarily rank the high schools in our county and say which ones we're going to believe and which ones we don't when it comes to grades. sort of an all or nothing thing. I'd use caution in using some of those measures. But, so how has New Jersey Community Colleges used multiple measures for placement? So far, most of the times, we've used each test measure as an independent measure, basically saying to the students, you pass one of them, you're college ready. You don't have to say I passed 2 of them or 3 of them or anything like that. But multiple measures is really, if you look at it further, is the idea of using the measures in combination, right? You can use them in a sort of a decision tree approach, where it's either yes, no, you reach the cutoff, you don't. And whether you work off campus or you don't, or you can use an additive approach where you actually combine the scores in different ways to reach a number to decide whether the student is college ready or not. Okay. Different ways of doing that, which we'll discuss further on, is a weighted composite score of the test when they're in the same range, composite score when the tests are on a different range, or using a composite predictor provided by a regression or a logistic regression analysis. I will pass the conversation off to my colleagues to talk about some of the multiple independent measures that colleges are currently using.
Thanks. So as you can see, Rob is our numbers guy. So if you're like me, you'll be putting your email address down so you can look at them in the privacy of your own office and review that. It's a lot of information at once. But we're all in the same boat. I think we're all struggling this first year. Weighted measures, the changes with Common Core has pushed and driven the changes with the Accuplacer. At the same time, the decision by the President's Council to say students are testing too much seems to have formed the perfect opportunity for us to start looking at this. So one of the things we're looking at is how can we do less testing but still support students. We all want to increase retention, graduation. Some of the students that maybe test poorly and are in remedial courses eventually say, I don't need this, and leave. Other students who are maybe transferring from your institution to my institution because we have aviation. In the past, what we've said is, well, you have to take the placement test. We said, well, I already did the remedial courses. That's great practice for the placement test. But now we're looking at saying, if you took remedial courses at Ocean, then that's good enough for us. Right? You should be starting at college level. We are trying to lift students up and to support them more. So in this first learning year, we're hoping that next year this time, we'll have had the success stories from everyone and we'll be able to see what works best. So in addition to the things that Rob has here on the slide, for ways to exempt students from testing is also AP classes. Right? If you're an AP math student, we're pretty sure you're ready for college level math. If you're an AP English student, you're ready for it. Many community college students do not take the SATs. And by only using that as our judgment, they're thrown into the placement testing. So sometimes we do it with high schools, which is wonderful. They come in, they get a tour, but then their friend finishes first, and they click their way through so they can go off to lunch, and then boom, they're in remedial courses. Is this what we need for our students? No, we really want to allow them to succeed. So one of the measures, the non-cognitive measures that Rob spoke about, is a tool called Success Navigator, where students report themselves, the type of person they are, how they plan, how they work. We are looking at including that. The student can feel a part of the process and including that with our data. So what we're actually doing is eliminating the need to test. Our non-traditional students will always have to have a test. They're not going to have their scores from whenever. But our students right out of high school don't necessarily have to. So what we're doing is looking at having them report what kind of a student they are. They have some bias, but the problem that presents to us as a group is then how to advise them. Previously at Mercer, everyone came to the testing center first. You registered online, and we were the first live face you saw. Great, nobody ever volunteered to come take a test. So they're not so happy either. So you try to be welcoming and warm, but you're still making them take a test that a great deal of them feel they don't need. So, but the only way they got out of it was by SAT scores or previous college credits. Right? And then, once they had scores in hand, they can go to advisement. So now that we're looking at GPAs, honors classes, AP classes, PARC scores, they can't stop us first. I don't have access to anybody's GPA, nor do I want it. So now, this is a change in our culture. This means first you have to start out with advisement. First, you have to go and they're gonna look at your GPA. They're gonna talk to you about the Success Navigator and how you did on that, and how you feel about being in a college level course, and what you feel you can do. So then, those that need it, there's still gonna be students that say, no, I wanna be in the developmental course, and that's fine. We're a community college, we accept everyone, that's what we're there for. But those that feel that they can do it will be allowed to go on to do it. After the developmental classes, the decision zone was added. We found that that's been very successful. So what we're looking now is allowing students to practice in math, to improve their skills, to lift them up into higher courses. There's one FourYear college that allows you to do a test at home that they developed, but you sign a paper saying whatever your score is, that's the class you'll be in. So if you think you're fooling someone having your statistics neighbor doing the test for you, you're the one that's going to be in that course, and there's no change in it. So we are having more student involvement, but we have to have that safety net. And that's what developmental classes are good for the incoming traditional students, those that don't have the skills and the confidence to go on. But our decision zone math and English classes will help those who are on that borderline. Make them maybe more challenged, more interested in staying at your school, more interested in moving more quickly towards that degree so they can get the jobs that we spoke about at the early meeting. So that is the kind of things we're looking at. And that's the kind of strategies that as colleges, we have to look at. How are we going to implement this? How is it going to work? And that's what this meeting and all of our New Jersey TASIC meetings and your state meetings is what is done to help improve things for students. Thank you. Lori?
So Lynn stole a lot of my thunder, but that's okay. And I'm just going to turn things around a little bit. At OCC, we are still in some of the very beginning stages of trying to determine what we're going to use and how we're going to use it for our multiple measures. Knowing that there are a host of different things that we can use in terms of the actual factors, and within them, the measures themselves. I have been working closely with the deans in English and in math so that they can have a look at the new skill sets that are, or the skill definitions that are associated not only with the new next generation Accuplacer, but also that which students are seeing in AP math or in their SATs, in the ACT scores, as well as comparing that to what the college curriculum is all about, so that students will be appropriately placed. And there's a lot of work going into it, but the faculty know what their students are capable of. We've all read the studies that in most instances, if you place students a bit higher than what a skill level shows, they will rise to that bar. And being in classes with other students from whom they can emulate behavior, that gives them the impetus to work a little harder, try a little harder, look for changes in their learning style, or maybe in their, improve their time management skills, things like that. So we're looking at all of that at OCC, and we are working together with admissions and advising and recruiting and the high schools to try to get whatever impact and input we can to make the placement the most sensible, the most worthwhile, and for the students to allow them to be as successful as they can possibly be. We're one of the few schools in the state, if not the only school, who all along has been accepting PSAT scores as an exemption to placement testing. So our students have had that advantage. All right, Rob, you have to drive this thing if we're going to change a screen, please. And one of the things that I would also like to do is throw out to the group, if anyone has been using multiple measures or has already made decisions on what their multiple measures are going to be, do you have any advice? Do you have any guidance for the rest of us who may be just fledglings in this endeavor? Anybody? Yes.
Lily Sanchez, Essex County College.
And everybody can sit, right?
Yes.
Sorry, forgive me. I'm a little short. So, considering the factors about local pertinence and also about changing demographics, okay? Something that is happening on the state, especially on the areas that are like near, you know, the crossing the river, New York, New Jersey. Constantly, our bilingual students and immigrant families feel tremendously segregated by the type of tests that we provide. And that's a demographic that is not gonna change, it's gonna increase. 76% of the companies, big companies that are moving to that area, that are looking for workers, are very unsatisfied. And I'm a recruiter and I also do a lot of contact with companies and everything else, and they're very unsatisfied with the fact that we are delaying our students to take their college credit courses because bilingual students have to go through this enormously and torturous process of acquiring the language first. And like a year and a half to 2 years after they finish their ESL program, they're finally connected to their credit courses. But I know that some of you are very creative and are actually offering degrees completely in Spanish, because that 76% of companies that are hiring, the biggest companies, don't even need people to speak English anymore. They just want them to like speak Spanish, and as long as they speak Spanish and they know their business courses and their accounting courses and their Excel sheets and their supply management thing, they can enter the labor. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the degree is. So that's not going to change. More immigrants are coming to our areas, and even the farthest community colleges that have less of a number, like us, for example, your demographic is going to change once again, like, and very rapidly. So when I went to the college, I only knew how to speak 3 words in English, just knowing I don't know. Okay, and I had to go myself through the torture of learning English. But when I learned it, I found that your testings, and I've taken all of it, Accuplacer, all of them, I feel that your testings are obsolete, and that does not consider the local pertinence that is like immigrant and international more and more so. And I feel that our students that are ESL or bilingual are paying the price of our own inefficiency to create a tool that is a little bit more diversity sensitive, I think.
Anybody else?
I'm sorry, and those students have these scores in mathematics, might not speak English, but my God. In like 6 months, they will learn the vocabulary so that they can do the math like, and you go like, is it really fair? Is it really fair? Are we really using the correct tools to measure that?
How many of you find that foreign-born students have better math skills than students who are educated in state of New Jersey? Just saying.
So I've worked about community college. I totally agree with what you're saying, and it's very difficult. And a lot of times, I think that one of the things that are happening is instead of looking and seeing what country students are coming from and seeing that they're actually English speaking already, they're just saying, hearing that you're coming from another country and, okay, you need to take this test.
Yes.
Like if you come from another country, take this test.
It's a
That's-
segregation
Right.
system.
So at Raritan, our one dean recently went through and upgraded and put a whole list of countries in. There's like 25 that no longer need to do that. And in reference to what you were saying about they're in that, they never can get out of doing those ESL courses. She also went through and worked with all the faculty to create a grouping of courses that are not writing intensive that they can take while they're taking their ESL. So there are some kind of innovative things that can be done.
Oh, certainly,
And
but
we're looking at, but we still need
testing,
to do
our
the testing
testing
changes.
mechanisms, I think needs to change like quick. Definitely.
And this is a wonderful opportunity to enable that kind of change.
Absolutely.
Because with the implementation of multiple measures and the autonomy that the schools have, to test or not to test is a decision that really can be made locally, depending upon the demographics of the area and whatever the decision makers are going for.
But I also think they should be able to make the choice of whether or not they have to take an ESL test or the regular version.
I mean, they do that, but I think that still, and I've seen in a lot of colleges that you utilize, like similar mechanisms, and I'm just telling you point blank, those mechanisms are wrong. Period. There are students, and this is where you easily notice it.
Okay.
Students who take
So-
non-credit courses or non-matriculated, who don't say that they need ESL, they go and for some reason, I'm not saying all of them, but when they don't say that they're bilingual or whatever and take courses, they go through the courses and survive, and somehow they manage by affiliation with their classmates to become successful in their classes. Only those who declare themselves from other country or ESLers who are forced to take that extra testing measure, somehow they get caught up on this horrendous process.
Thank you.
And again, that's a goal of multiple measures, to try to change the way we are looking at a student and to look at a student holistically. Okay, this is the first time that something has ever come up. Well, it's not the first time, but it's being given very serious consideration to looking at the non-cognitive measures as well as cognitive measures, but in a different light. For example, as this slide points out, we can use a high school GPA. There are lots of pros to using that. It's readily available, it's easy to get to, it's a measure of the student's overall academic strength. But when you start talking about that with some faculty, there is a concern because they understand that how a GPA is computed from different districts in your area may vary. So again, it involves a lot of close work between the academic side of the house and the admissions and registration folks to be able to review all of this material and come up with the most effective as well as one of the more efficient ways of determining proper placement for students. Subject area in high school and computing a GPA, yes,
I got a question.
yes.
So we use multiple measures. I'm from Union County College, and
Great.
we do use multiple measures, and we have found that it has been successful in completion rates for our students. But I have a different kind of question. So one of the things that we struggle with is they place into a college level math course, say, but we want them then to take a college level math exam so that we can see really what math class they should be placed into. So my question is, what sort of tool do you use to figure out what math they should go into once they place into college level math? Because I believe the one that we're using may be going away in a year or so. So that's my question.
And I've been working with our math faculty
Okay.
on that very thing.
Okay.
Because they are, as we speak, working on what the cut score should be for the replacement of the college level math test. And their determination is that it's got a lot of good trig and stuff in it, but not stuff that's right for placement into our pre-calculus and calculus courses the way they are written now. Their goal is to do things that are more in line with what happens to be on this screen right now.
Okay.
And to look at their subject GPA. How have they done in math overall?
Okay.
What math classes have they taken? Again, understanding that what they're getting from the different feeder schools could vary somewhat, and it's going to take some doing and work together with the registrar's office to try to figure out how something like that could happen. But our math faculty feels most comfortable working either with a subject area GPA or taking a look at the individual courses, theoretically the most recent or their final math course, and find out what math course that was, how did they do in it, and where would that put them in the grand scheme of things, especially with respect to placement beyond the college algebra and
yeah.
into the pre-calculus and calculus. Yes?
Are you saying that your math folks are the ones who are placing the students? I mean,
No.
But you said that,
I am saying that our math folks are working on determining what would be the most logical placement tools and measures to be used at OCC based on the curriculum of the math courses that we have.
so do you have a trustworthy advising area that
It's
can
growing.
look at this multiple measures?
It is growing. It is growing and it is being developed to be able to change their MO a little bit and work more on the advising side rather than this is what the computer spit out as your placement. Yes.
I just heard like I'm a math teacher, so in Accuplacer test and other math tests, some parts students are not supposed to use calculators. Now they are, in the future we are going to use technology more in those tests. I don't know how accurate it is. That's what I heard. So it will be like testing more computational skills than conceptual knowledge. Is that going to happen? Do you know anything about it? Or does it affect?
I'm not sure I understand what your question is.
Like in testing, mathematical testing.
Yes.
So some parts students are not supposed to use technology. Like that's how we do testing with math. I don't know how much you are aware of that part.
So are you speaking about using the calculators?
Yes.
Or language translators?
A calculator.
A calculator. Well, we have Keith Henry here from the College Board, if that's part of their plan. Right now, we can only use the program as built, right? So since the test was normed based without a calculator on those questions, we don't allow it.
I heard now in the future, it's going to be more like students will be allowed to use technology. Is that going to happen?
The Accuplacer system allows the schools to decide whether an on-screen calculator will be provided for certain items. But the test was designed as a placement test. So the idea is we want to know what the student knows, not what a calculator knows. So the only calculator that is available is a basic calculator. It doesn't do any advanced functions. And it only comes up for questions, I usually tell students to their dismay, where it really won't help you get the right answer. It might help you get the answer quicker, but unless you understand the concepts, the calculator doesn't help. And the calculator is not available on every question. It is only available on those questions where they felt that you need to know more than just basic computational skills to answer. So for most of us, we've turned on the calculator for our tests, but we do not allow handheld calculators or advanced graphing calculators into the test itself. Again, it's not necessarily an admissions test looking for potential, it's a placement test to find out what their ability level is.
Okay, Rob, I'll go back to you to start talking more.
Our time is limited to 7 minutes.
So when it comes to multiple measures, besides just using different tests and different measures be able to place a student. Now, a lot of people are moving toward an idea of a decision tree, where a student, where you're using multiple measures, but it's basically almost a yes/no answer, or different areas decide whether a student places into a course or not. Okay? This gives an advisor or a counselor a guideline to follow. For instance, it might start off with a test score, and do you reach the cutoff or do you not? Of course, if you reach the cutoff, you get into that appropriate credit level course. If you're below the cutoff, a school may decide further, did you make it into the decision zone or not? If not, you're placed into an appropriate developmental course. If so, they might use a non-cognitive factor, a question, or a probe to decide whether this student is ultimately placed into a credit level. I didn't have a lot of room here. I didn't make a very elaborate decision design, but you can get the basic idea that you can add a lot of different questions. You can have GPA involved in that. You can, whether it be overall GPA, or a question of sectional or specific courses. Here at Middlesex, we look at grades in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and pre-calculus at a minimum on the math side, and we look at 12th grade English, the final grades, to see if a student can place higher. Different pros and cons of the system, but the additive approach, I don't know if it's used very often here in New Jersey. The easiest way to think of it is when looking at the same range. For instance, some schools like to use both the sentence skills and the reading comprehension test. Now, many times, since they're on the same scale, those old tests were on a 20 to 120 scale. You can add them together, use the combined score, or you can divide it by 2 to get an average, so the student understands it more toward the scale that they took the test in. Or you can weight them differently. You can say that the writing test is worth 2/3 compared to 1/3 of the reading comprehension test. I know that one school uses the second version, or has used it in the past, where they combine both the old reading comprehension, census skills, and Accuplacer tests, add all three together, and then have the student placed on that. Or you can use a composite predictor based on a multiple regression or logistic regression analysis. If you don't have the people that can help you with that, the College Board has a free service, the Admitted Class Evaluation Service, that can help you make a formula like that. Where you put in multiple measures besides just test scores, any other factor that you've measured the students on to see, that would give you the formula of the different weights and probabilities on whether they would succeed or not. Is it still B or higher or C or higher on the reports? Yes. But other schools might want to use the whole entire GPA and try to predict it in that way. Quickly. And again, pros and cons of that. The one difficulty with using a composite predictor is that it comes up with a number, usually, that is hard to explain to the student. Like your number is 7. And none of your tests were on a scale on 7. And that, because a lot of times we get students asking us, how close was I? How much more do I have to improve on this test to be able to place it? With a composite predictor, you can mathematically show that it's a pretty accurate placement. It is hard to explain the numbers to the student. I know they think of it as a little bit of a black box. Yes?
Yes. Lori Austin from Raritan Valley Community College, and I just have a quick question based on the fact that these are kind of statewide guidelines you're putting together.
Yes.
How much emphasis, because I didn't hear a lot of it, is being placed on pathways? I've done a lot of research in the state of New Jersey and at the general liberal arts math courses, and have found that it's just testing them and how much algebra knowledge they know is completely useless on their success in those courses. So, plus, there's been a lot of studies in statistics pathways that show you do not need 2 classes of algebra. You do not need elementary and intermediate algebra. So I'm just curious, where is the state right now with looking at, because I feel the placement practices should be completely different depending on your pathway, to the point where some pathways, you don't even need to look at math placement at all. So that's.
In some instances, that's taken into account by what we're calling the decision zone. In other instances, There are other schools also looking at pathways, and they understand that someone on a liberal arts track needs completely different kinds of math experience and capabilities than those on a STEM path. So at least at OCC, that's been taken into account with the different tracks. And although it's the same test based on the level of competency and which majors, that's what determines placement with different scores. And because of that, even with a multiple measures factor, it would also involve the analysis of different high school courses and your results there.
Yeah, and I just mentioned before that different schools have different agreements with their four-year institutions. I do know that a lot of schools do accept for credit statistics course that only have Algebra 1 as a prereq. And again, that's understood. I tend to go for the higher cutoff, only that I want to make sure that the student can transfer it no matter what school they try to apply to.
Yeah, but we lose a lot of students that way, and you're making students pay a lot of money who didn't need it. And one of the things I feel, because these are statewide guidelines, if the community colleges could just come together better and really work with the four-year institutions, then perhaps we can have better transferability and better placement that aligns with what they're doing. And maybe they'll start to do what we're doing.
No, I understand, but that's a little bit of the coordinated autonomy. We do try to work together, but when we met back in 2006, I remember when they were discussing placing into what course, there was quite a lively discussion about what is college algebra, or what is, English 101 or English 100 or 121. And they basically could only agree on the levels with about 80% agreement. And they gave every institution at least 20% leeway, upper or below, in subject matter. And the four-year, we have the same issue with the four-year schools. They're all independent, and they all have their own different courses and their own departments, and what they accept for transfer, and what they teach. So, just like other schools in the area, you're more concerned with the schools that you feed most of your students to. We look at Rutgers, New Brunswick, and we look at Kane a lot here. Other schools might be looking at Rutgers, Cameron, or another, or something closer to Philadelphia, or further north into New York City. Right? Again, it depends on the schools you're feeding into, and certainly that is why the looseness in the statement was given, to give the people in each individual school the autonomy to adjust it to their own population and the four-year schools they're working.
All right, thanks, Rob, and Lori, and Lynn for a wonderful presentation. Give them a round. If you have any questions